Yes.
All right, good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, especially we are seeing a bit of a surge, right? A couple volunteers are like, I'm gonna hang back this time, which is totally understandable. Thank you all for coming and coming in person. And we're gonna learn some more about trauma tonight. This is continuing our series as we do every other month with training and equipping, and then the other months doing some self-care. Because we know that you guys are on the front lines of serving just children in our community. So I'm going to introduce Ellen Kelly. She's a licensed social worker at Wellspring. And she's Lifespring. I always say Wellspring for some reason.
Well, there's Wellstone Hospital and Lifespring.
And then, they got married. If they got married, they would have.
And then there's Lifespan, which has nothing to do with that. Yes.
Lifespring, and she is the assistant vice president of training and special projects, and she is a plethora of information and has so graciously accepted coming and speaking us. Here we go.
I am very happy to be here tonight. I love CASA. I love the mission. You all do such important work, such incredibly important work. And to be volunteering your time to work with kids in need is just an amazing thing. So if you could is there anyone on here at the moment?
No, it just recorded.
And I will talk to them. Okay. So if you don't mind, if we go around the table and just tell me your name and how long you've been volunteering. So would you mind starting? 14. Okay. Oh, very good. Oh, okay. Nice. We'll go right here.
I'm Kelly Kingsley. I've only been at CASA for 8-10 months, something like that. I'm a teacher, this is my third first year teaching. So I teach at CASA.
Where do you teach?
In New Albany, at Mount Tabor.
At Mount Tabor.
Hi, Kelly.
I'm from Hopewell.
New blood and a good experience. That's a perfect combo, isn't it?
I'm Elena Pryor. I have been working with CASA for 8 months? 9 months? I know it does. Yeah, I've been here for a little while, not very long though.
Okay, all right.
Hi, my name is Wendy Staggs, and I just started. So,
And we met in the stairwell. So
I brought you where you needed to be.
that's right. That's right. So
I'm just retired, and I said I'd help with the community.
great. Great.
My name is Wanda Guerrero, and I think it's been about 8 months.
Okay. All right.
I'm retired.
So when you think about trauma and maybe trauma and the brain, does anything pop into your head? Because I know with all the various levels of experience and working history, you might have lots of information on that. So what pops into your head when I say trauma in the brain? PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Definitely connected, strongly connected. Okay, what is your name and how long have you been with
My name
CASA?
is Angie Gibson. I've been with CASA since November.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Anything else that you know about trauma in the brain? Maybe you've seen it on an episode of Grey's Anatomy, or you read a book on it, or you've had some other training at CASA or other places. So, okay, good. That gives me an idea of what to do here. So, okay, so it was kind of a magical storm coming together. A lot of things had to happen so we could figure out this life-changing thing that we figured out about trauma in the brain. So one of the things that had to happen was the MRI machine needed to be invented. Anybody ever had an MRI? Okay, yep. First invented in the late 70s. The first one was a picture of an arm that took 15 hours. So they've gotten it down since then. So they had to invent the MRI and then subsequently CAT scans and PET scans so we can look at the brain while someone is still alive. And until that, we couldn't do that. And we really were guessing a whole bunch on what actually happened in the brain. And it was a lot of wrong guesses, actually. So that had to happen. And then simultaneously, two people in the United States were looking at what goes on in the brain in terms of weight loss. Okay, so there was a large clinic in California that was a weight loss clinic, and it was one of those where you did the diet, the liquid diet, and I can't think of what that's
I can't remember.
caused.
I can't remember what it-
But anyway, okay, so they were doing that. Here, do you want me to kind of stay in camera? Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
And so many people would take part in that dieting process and lose 100 pounds, but then eventually they would gain it back, and even more sometimes. And the guy that was over that at Kaiser Permanente, a clinic, was going, what the heck is going on? And at the same time, a doctor at the CDC. Now, when I first started teaching this class, the CDC was on nobody's radar. We all now know what the CDC is, but he was looking at the same thing. And so miraculously, somebody put one guy in touch with the other guy, and they said, hey, do you think this has anything to do with the brain development, and possibly how my brain developed different from your brain, developed different from your brain because of what was going on in our lives when our brain was developing. So that is from birth, or actually in utero, all the way to about age 26 or so. That's when the brain is developing. That's another miraculous thing that we figured out, was the brain keeps developing until age 26. Do you know that the reason the drinking age in Indiana is 21 is because they used to think that brain development was all done by age 21, and that it was okay to throw alcohol into the mix. Okay, so, but anyway, as I said, they had a lot of wrong information. So put all this information together, and the guy at the clinic in California gave this 10-question questionnaire out to 60,000 adults to look at, for them to report what trauma they experienced during their childhood, and then look at what kind of health concerns that they had. And they figured out that the more childhood trauma, the more likely to have health concerns, including the weight gain. And so that was just like this fabulous aha moment that changed everything. It was that big of a deal. So all of this had to come together for us to be able to now know this. Okay, so what is trauma? So it is, and by the way, the handouts have all the slides on it. So just do with them what you like. So trauma can be an event or a series of events or a set of circumstances. Okay, so a lot of different options there. That's experienced by an individual, and it's physical or emotionally harmful or threatening, and it's going to have a lasting effect. Okay, so that's our definition of trauma. And we need to remember that it is about the experience, the event, and the effect. So we could have a tornado in New Albany. Could have a tornado in New Albany. And the way that it affects me would be very different from how it affects you, And there's no judgment. Your trauma is your trauma, and my trauma is my trauma. And that may seem kind of simple, but that's really taken us social workers a long time to get behind. I mean, that is a big change.
I believe that even children in the same household experience trauma.
Absolutely. Yep, children, she said children in the same household can experience the same trauma in different ways.
Yes.
And it's really important to remember that so that we're not judging like, well, what's the matter with you? And, I went through that tornado and I turned out fine. We've got to have a little grace on this. Okay, so we have acute trauma, a single event limited in time, okay, a serious accident. And then again, that word serious, what is serious accident to me might not be serious to you. Yeah. So a serious accident, a single act of community violence. Okay. I would guess that everyone in this room has trauma effects from 9/11. It was a single act of community violence that affected our entire country and other parts of the world too. A natural disaster, floods, tornadoes, winter storms, sudden or violent loss of a loved one, or physical or sexual assault. All examples, not an inclusive list, but all examples. And then we have chronic trauma. I'm going to stand. I'm sorry. So multiple traumatic events, such as domestic violence that happens over and over, or homelessness, or continuing community violence, or long-standing trauma, such as physical abuse, neglect, war, or even being a member of a marginalized group. All right. So in this case, the effects are cumulative. Every time, if you're in a domestic violence situation, you have an incident, you experience that trauma. And then the next time you have the incident, you experience this trauma and you re-experience this trauma. And then the third time, you're re-experiencing. Okay, so that chronic, the effects are cumulative, and each event reminds the person of the prior trauma, especially if they have not gotten some treatment for that traumatic event. Okay, they just relive it and relive it. Okay, and then complex trauma, it's interpersonal. So especially by trusted individuals, premeditated and planned, and usually experienced in childhood. So it can be one time or it can be chronic, and it causes a more severe reaction because it's deliberate, but also because it's one human being to another human being. There's something in our brain that can rationalize the trauma of a tornado differently than if it's a sexual assault by a human being. So when they did this giant study called the ACEs, anybody ever heard of the ACEs? Okay, good. Must have been discussed, that's right, okay. They found out that 60% of adults in the US report experiencing abuse or other difficult circumstances during childhood. And I would imagine at the time that bowled some people over, okay? That nobody guessed that it would be 60% that experienced something. 26% of children in the US will witness or experience a traumatic event before the age of 4. And again, brain is crucially developing from birth to 4 to 6, and then it starts developing differently. And more than 60% of youth age 17 and younger have been exposed to crime, violence, abuse, directly or indirectly. Indirectly is being told about it, watching it on television, that kind of thing. But a lot of this is being told about it. It's that the lore that, that we tell our family members what happened to us and that. So, So we are shaped by our experiences. Okay. Those early experiences they're wired into our bodies. And in general, they teach us that the world is a dangerous place. And I had a picture of a wolf and somehow it didn't pop up. Or it teaches us that the world is safe and nurturing. Okay. So in general, that's a message that we get. And you all know people that you can tell as an adult that they do kind of have the vision that the world is not safe. Okay. And then you know people, yourselves, I hope, that look at the world as safe and nurturing. So that's these experiences, they get actually built in. Oh, there's the wall. Okay, so part of this information was so earth-shattering is because they figured out how this early childhood trauma can affect your health throughout your life, including causing you to die 25 years younger than the average. So the more trauma you had, the more likely you are to die young. Now, these numbers came up at about the same time that those of us in the mental health field were learning that people with a major mental illness were dying 25 years younger than the average. Not about suicide, that was still not connection. And so those of us in mental health are going, what is that about? And the same time that all this other stuff is happening. So we are born relatively trauma-free, although trauma can happen in the uterus, I realize that, or during birth, but relatively trauma-free. And then we have these adverse childhood experiences. And it changes the way the brain develops and the brain acts. And because of that, if it's not treated, it causes social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. It actually changes. And so because for many, many years, we didn't even realize. I would make a horrible actress, but not. Get on your legs, yes. Because we didn't even realize this, we weren't treating people for this, but people would treat themselves, okay? People, want to feel calmer, they want to feel less stress, they want their brain not to feel on fire anymore, okay? So they would do things to treat this impairment themselves. And so things like smoking cigarettes, eating a lot of sweets and fats, things like that are things that using drugs, using alcohol, things we do to calm ourselves. Okay. And so really no judgment. I really did not mean that at all. But we do this, and we all know that we have comfort eating. I mean, yeah. And that's what that's about, is we are comforting the brain by doing that. And so if you do that long enough and badly enough, you're going to have disease and disability. If you drink a lot of alcohol long enough, you're going to have disease and disability, or smoking, or meth, or even sugar. And then that leads to early death. Okay, so kind of a simple little chart, but it was earth-shattering when we figured that out. It's like, oh, okay. And so this has changed everything in my field. And it has changed everything. Well, it should be changing everything in public health field. And they're working on that. But it looks simple, but it is just like, yeah, earth-shattering, changing the world. Okay, so let's do a little brain anatomy here. Okay, at birth, the structure of the brain is present, but it's far from complete. So I want everybody to make two fists and put them together like that. Okay, this is about the size, two fists of your adult brain. And we're going to be talking about, okay, this is like the brain stem. So we're going to be talking about from the inside of the brain out. So your palm out, that's how the brain develops. Starts off in here, develops out here. And from the back and the bottom, brain stem to the front. So the front part is the last part that develops. It's the part that makes us make good decisions. And we all know 22-year-olds who are still making bad decisions, and we get mad at them and stomp our feet. The brain is still developing, okay, because that's the last part. So born, and the brain immediately starts learning things, okay? And every time it learns something, two neurons in the brain make a connection called a synapses. And by age 8 months, 1,000 trillion connections have been made. 8 months, okay? And so it reaches its peak at about age 3. And then by about age 16, the brain has figured out, don't need that, don't need that, don't need this, don't need that, okay, because that's a lot, okay? So they kind of get through that until the connections are all there by about age 16, okay? So another thing that we had to figure out, maybe some of you all have always lived in a world where we could identify the human genome, but I remember before that was identified, I remember when they first figured out DNA and that scrolling little, what's it called? Something, what? This, I remember when they first figured it out. So all of that had to come together. So we figured out that all the neurons in our brain are composed of genes. And about 50,000 genes make up the human body. Okay. Half of these are in the nervous system. So that's the brain, the spinal cord, and all the little things that come out. Okay. And then at least half of those depend on environmental stimulation to be activated. So we used to think that you were born with your genes and that's what you had. And now we figured out that the environment needs to help things turn on or not turn on, okay? So they need to be activated that way. That is why twins, identical twins, one can be healthy and slim and the other one can die of heart disease at age 45. It's about which ones get turned on by that environmental stimulation. Okay, so positive experiences build those healthy neural connections. A baby cries and somebody picks it up and comforts. That's several positive neural connections. The butt gets wet, somebody comes along and changes that diaper and they feel better, okay? All of those things are those positive neural connections, and it's about learning. But if there's negative experiences, then the brain just kind of goes, danger, 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 and it's kind of on fire. And so the brain releases hormones to calm it, okay? But this also delays the development of the brain, all right? So let's say, okay, let's say that you're a baby, your brain is growing, you're laying in bed, you're just laying there, pretty unable to defend yourself, okay? And something just flies into your face, okay? So your body says, danger, danger, something's going on, something's happening, okay? I need to protect myself. I need to figure out what's going on, okay? And these are the things that keep us alive, okay? Probably as a baby, you would just open your mouth and scream and somebody would come help you, okay? So think about humans 10,000 years ago, living here in New Albany area, not called that then, really close to the river though. And so they're living in small tribes of people, and the women go out during the day and look for fruits and nuts, wild fruits and nuts to feed everybody. And maybe this woman has a baby on her hip. And so she's walking through the forest looking for these things to feed everybody. And out jumps a coyote. Ah! Okay, so immediately the brain says, danger, danger. First off, you got to stay alive. And secondly, your progeny needs to stay alive because I don't exist if my ancestors 10,000 years ago didn't live to propagate, okay? And so fight or flight, I decide to either bust the coyote in the nose or run from the coyote, okay? So all these things are good. These are good things happening because it's keeping me alive. but my brain isn't able to do much. Neither is my stomach or anything, because all my resources are going to the fight or flight. So it's kept me alive. I run away from the coyote with my baby. Everything's fine. I get back to the little village that we have right there on the Ohio River. And I start telling people about what happened to me. And maybe I give the baby to someone else and say, I'm gonna go take a nap, rest, okay? And that nap is what's giving the brain the chance to calm, okay? Your body did you a service, but you want to calm it down, okay? It's instances where if the child cries and nobody takes care of the child, or someone smacks the child, it's that constant trauma that brain is constantly full of chemicals. And when it is, it can't develop like it's supposed to, okay? All right, so again, thank you to PET scans and whoever invented those. We are able to look at the brain of a 2-year-old here, all right? And you see that this is typical development, and the reddish, orangish areas are the most active, okay? And some of the purple areas, but you can see a difference in a 2-year-old brain with extreme neglect. All of this part of the brain, well, most of the part of the brain, has not been able to develop because of those chemicals always in it, trying to protect it from the neglect. But we do see the brain stem, that's the most active. And the brain stem is what keeps us safe. Okay, all right. The brainstem, we're born with that, fully formed and functioning. It controls hearing and eye movements and body movements. When this drops on the baby, the fact the baby can go like this, that comes from the brainstem. Analyzing the senses all the time. Oh, my butt is wet and cold. I better scream and somebody will fix that. Oh, my stomach is really empty. I better scream and someone will fix that. Sensory analysis. Then things that we don't think about, like heart rate and breathing and things that keep us alive, and that flight or fight response. All of that comes from the brainstem, that downstairs part of the brain. So in our brain, it's this part, the brainstem, and then we're looking at the limbic system, which is in the palm of your hand, that inside part of the brain. That's fully developed when we're born. And it assigns meaning to what our body is perceiving, okay? Cold butt, oh my God, I need my diaper changed. Figuring that out. Stomach feels empty, need to cry and get some food, okay? It creates our emotions and drives and the physical response to them. And it's vital in creating memories. And the fact that the brain can create memories helps keep us alive. It's how we learn that don't put your hand on the burner, okay? You do that once, you got a memory, you won't do that again, will you? And then we have the hippocampus, also inside that palm area, that releases cortisol to calm and regulate the brain. It helps us with cause and effect thinking, that short-term memory. Again, cause and effect thinking keeps us alive, okay? And pretty explicit memories. Does anybody have really explicit memories from really, really young? What's the youngest you can remember?
I have a memory. I was 3, my mother opening a pressure cooker and it exploding on her.
Okay.
Because she was pregnant with my brother, and I had to go. It's traumatic.
Yes, and really explicit. Yeah, I bet you could tell me the color of dress your mother had on, or, well, I don't
She
need
had a
that.
tank top on.
Okay,
That's
there
all
you
I
go.
remember was a tank
There
top.
you go. Yeah.
She was pregnant.
Can you remember what you were wearing a year ago tonight? No? But you can remember your mother had on a tank top.
Or
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah, well, yes. But it's that explicit memory that telling you that was a dangerous situation and you need to remember everything that happened so it doesn't happen again. Anybody got a memory from further back than age 3?
I was, my mother had almost died when she carried and delivered. So from the time I was born until the time I was 1, I lived with a great aunt and uncle. They were the only parents I knew. And then when I was 1 years old, they took me to this house
Oh,
where
wow.
these people were, and these boys were, and I spoke French. I didn't even speak English. I spoke my great aunt and uncle were French, so I spoke French. And they were leaving, and I was trying to get dressed to go with them. And of course, I was calling them and talking to them in French, and don't leave me. And they told me they had to go, and they left me.
At age 1. Yes. Yeah, at age 1. And very, very explicit memory. I was trying to get dressed. I was speaking in French. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Your brain was telling you danger, danger.
yeah. Where you
Yeah.
going without me?
Yes.
I didn't know anybody else there.
Right. Right. Yes. And then also in the downstairs brain, we have the amygdala. Okay. And so this is important in processing emotions and regulating emotions. It's where those memories are stored. It takes in information through all 5 senses. Okay, it has that fear receptor, and that triggers that unconscious fight or flight mechanism. We're doing some training at Lifespring and about short-term solution focused therapy by a woman who is one of the people who's written a lot of books on it. And she talks to, when you talk to someone and try to get them to calm down, you're whispering to their amygdala. And I love that idea. You're whispering to it of, it's okay, don't have to be afraid, and you're talking to that little tiny in part of their brain. Okay, so now we're going to look at what's called the upstairs part of the brain. As the brain begins to develop after birth, all the way to age 26 or so. So the first part is the upstairs, is the cerebral cortex, where that is where we can think more abstractly. Right? We can begin to think symbolically, morally, insightfully. So sometimes our justice system will punish a very young child for doing something immoral and without much insight when that part of their brain hasn't even developed yet. When that part of the brain hasn't developed in the average child, but especially if there was any kind of trauma, it will be slower to develop, okay? So that's why this education is so important for everybody to get this. It is not that the child is being defiant, it's that that part of the brain hasn't developed yet for whatever reason. Okay, and we have the prefrontal cortex, so we're moving up from the back to the front. It helps regulate the body and emotions. I have a coworker who has a 9-year-old little girl, and until recently, she did not have good control over her emotions. And the other day in the car, something went wrong and she watched her little girl kind of go like this and take a few deep breaths. And she asked her what's going on. And she said, well, my New Year's resolution is to try to control my emotions better. Now, a year ago, she could have made that resolution, but if her brain wasn't ready, but her brain was ready to begin regulating those emotions. Yeah. You know, 2-year-olds, they just, and we hope that as children get to be 5 and 6 and 7, they don't do that anymore as the brain develops. Attuning to other people. So kind of a definition for empathy, being flexible, having empathy and self-awareness, being intuitive and moral, and then losing those fears. Okay, I remember my granddaughter was at a stage, I think about 1.5 or 2, and her father has a business that he runs out of the home. So anytime a male worker would come in, she would just scream because she had at that age, that fear of any male face she didn't know. Okay. And, you know, a year later, she grew out of that. She lost those fears that didn't serve her, that didn't protect her. And then you get the very last part of the brain that develops, the frontal lobe. And lots of 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 23-year-olds don't have forethought and impulse control because the brain is not there yet. All right? Not because they're stupid, not because they're not listening to you, not because they're, you know, criminals, okay? It's because the brain is not there. So the very last part that develops is about attention and working memory and planning and organizing. I know some of the teachers and former teachers in the room, that's something that you really teach in school, is how to plan and to organize. And so it takes a long time to get that for some kids because the brain is not there. And then we have the anterior cingulate gyrus. So that's kind of the gear shifter of the brain. And it helps people learn to be cooperative. When I was telling the story about humans that lived 10,000 years ago on the Ohio River, they had to cooperate to stay alive, didn't they? I showed you, I had to go out into the woods to gather the nuts and berries, or everybody else back at camp was going to starve to death. And then someone had to take care of my baby while I let my brain calm down, or bad things would have happened. Okay. So teaching cognitive flexibility, cooperation, moving from one idea to another, seeing options, seeing errors, going with the flow. For those of you all who have been doing CASA a little longer, some of these things remind you of some of the kiddos that you work with, that they're just not able to go with the flow, or they're not able to move from one idea to another. Okay. That's what's going on. It's just working it out in the brain. So in a state of fear, we use the downstairs part of our brain. So, and as the perceived threat level goes up, the less thoughtful and more reactive our responses become. And that's true for all of us. Okay. If I'm driving in the car and I almost get hit, that is not a time for me to make a decision about whether I want to buy a new house or not. Okay. My brain is like safety, 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 not think this through with your frontal lobe. Okay. Yeah. So fear changes the way we think. And it automatically goes to the downstairs part of the brain. Now, we look at some of these terms up here, and some of them are, kind of have bad meanings to them in ways, lying, stealing, manipulation, defiance, aggression. But I want to make the case to you that for someone who is living in fear, these responses have kept them alive. Okay, you manipulate to get what you want, definition of manipulation, and sometimes that want or need, I really should say you manipulate to get what you need. Sometimes that's food, water, shelter, okay, to stay alive. You might have to lie to stay alive, especially if you're in an abusive situation. Okay? My father was a child of the Depression. His father died when he was 2. His stepfather died when he was 5. He ended up in an orphanage in the Depression and rarely had enough to eat. And so at age 15, he got caught stealing a banana and ended up in the criminal justice system. So he was stealing because he was hungry, okay? And so that I want you to kind of look at these. These are biologically based fear responses. They're not decisions that people make. They come from this part of the brain. So sleep issues can be connected into that. If you can't relax enough to sleep, your body is, you're not going to sleep. If your body is going to say, you're not safe, you got to stay awake. You got to stay somewhat semi-alert, okay? Aggression, defiance, gorging, starving, purging, all those kinds of things come from biologically based fear responses, okay? And it's because that person is living in the downstairs part of their brain and living there too much because of their trauma. And that's what the brain is telling them to do. Stay alive, to stay safe. Okay, so trauma can affect our ability to trust others, okay, our sense of personal safety, our effectiveness in navigating life's changes, and our ability to be emotionally regulated. All right, so these are all things that our brain is just not capable of going to this front part because the world feels so unsafe that the brain is coming from this part of the brain, living out of that part of the brain. So we need to think about safety. So individuals that are living in that downstairs part of the brain have a real difficult time broadening their focus about studying algebra when really their brain is worried about what's going to be going on at home when I get home tonight, or is there going to be food tonight, or are we going to have enough money, and is the electricity going to get cut off in a couple of weeks? Okay. It's really hard to broaden your focus. We all understand the importance of higher learning of things like algebra and literature and science. It's really hard to focus on that when your brain is just on fire like you. It's hard to engage in self-reflection, alter our behavior, consider new ideas, or even accept help. Okay, and you guys are the helpers, and you come into the family to help them, and it can be hard to accept that help if all that's going on up here is that downstairs part of the brain is saying, you're not safe, you're not safe, you're not safe. Can't trust anyone. Yeah, I can't think about the bigger picture. Maybe some of you all have talked about that with your CASA people. Let's look at the bigger picture here. I know with clients I've had, it's so frustrating to think, come on, let's think about the bigger picture. They can't, it's not because I'm a bad therapist or they're mad at me or they're trying to be defiant. Their brain won't let them do that because all their brain is thinking about is, I got to stay alive. Okay, so this information seems kind of dour, but it's not. Because another thing that we have learned by being able to take pictures of the brain and look at the brain and all of that is that we have learned that we can change our patterns. We can also change our genes, G-E-N-E-S. And that has been something that, those of us from the older generation of, okay, you're born with the genes you've got, there's nothing you can do. Your dad died at 45 from heart disease. Oh my gosh, it's, written on the wall. But we have learned that genes can turn off and turn on depending on what we do. And so this is a, really kind of earth-shattering. So the beauty of the stuff about genes turning off and on is that this is reversible, okay? And the brain is plastic. I've always had, people say that all the time, the brain is plastic. I've always had kind of a hard time with that until I thought, well, they don't mean like the hard plastic of a plastic plate. They mean like Play-Doh. Play-Doh is plastic. The brain is like Play-Doh, okay? It's moldable. So what can help? What can help your families and your kiddos or anybody else that might be living in that downstairs part of the brain? First off, physical activity. Okay, it concerns me when schools keep cutting back on physical activity. Now, I understand it's a very complicated decision, but it concerns me because that's what's going to help, is to get out there and run it off. Okay, sensory input. So helping them kind of get in touch with all 5 of their senses. All right. In your self-care, have you done anything that's about like a grounding exercise that's about the senses, or?
We did a little bit of some grounding exercise. We had a yoga come and our yogi can't come and teach a class for us, and she did a few like breathing grounding exercises.
That's exactly what that's about, is get in touch with all 5 of your senses will help you get out of that downstairs part of the brain. One of the grounding exercises I have is just take a hot cup of coffee and smell it. And then as you drink it, feel the heat on your lips and your tongue and your throat and all the way to just get in touch with that sense. And that can, really, that could be a minute. But things like that are helpful. Doing things where you can feel your feet on the ground. Okay, you can feel that. You can feel different things or smell things or taste things. Okay. Frequency, so repeat, which we know helps anybody learn, okay? And then helping people learn that they do have a sense of control. And that's by you all being consistent and you all being predictable and you all setting patterns in their life or helping them set patterns in their life. And, I know you work with families in the court system, and the court systems do not always appear to be consistent, predictable patterns. I know that. or at least to those of us outside not wearing the robe, right? It doesn't always seem like that. So that means you have to try extra hard to give them some consistency and predictability and patterns to their life, okay? And maybe help them see that the court system does have that. It's just sometimes not easy to see, especially if you're living in the downstairs part of your brain that's screaming safety, safety, safety. Okay, so stressing safety. Talking to your families about all kinds of safety. Are they prepared that if Saturday's or Sunday's 50% chance of snow turns into a foot of snow? Are your families prepared for that? Do they feel like they're safe in their home? Do they have smoke detectors in their home? Do they have proper space heaters that can't be kicked over and start fires? All those kinds of things are important. And it say, well, how is that connected to the court system? You're helping them learn to be safe, to feel safe, so they can get out of this part of the brain into this part of the brain. One of the things I generally have worked with, well, a lot, I've worked with adults with a serious mental illness and schizophrenia especially. And so this time of year, we really stress, get ready for snow just in case. Make sure you have, 20 cans of green beans in your cabinet. Make sure that you know that if the snow day comes and it's the day to get your medicine filled, how are you going to handle that? Many of the clients walk into services at Lifespring. How do you walk safely? Okay, let's practice that. So helping them feel safe is then going to allow their brain to start thinking about planning and broadening and things. So teaching them about trauma. Okay, I have a lot of this material I have in a smaller form that we work with the clients on, and we teach them about this miraculous stuff that scientists have figured out. And this is what's going on in your brain. And you just can't believe some of them go, it explains it all. I feel so much better. So education on trauma, relaxation skills, okay? From something like an hour-long yoga. I remember when they started teaching yoga at the youth shelter in Clark County, and we had this big, burly 15-year-old kid who came in to see our child psychiatrist, and he came in, and he was so excited about the yoga, and we could have fallen over. I mean, what? And he was into the yoga. He noticed what relaxation did to his brain. Yeah. But even, when you meet with a family, starting off the meeting with some deep breathing. Okay, let's all just breathe deeply together. Or another grounding exercise, which can be a minute. Okay, or maybe ending it after some stressful conversation, ending it with some deep breathing or some muscle relaxation, something like that. So relaxation skills, very important. Helping them learn to figure out affect. So what people are saying with their face, finer things, instead of looking at a face and saying danger, danger, looking further into the face and saying, no, that person is happy, that person cares, that person is safe. And envisioning a whole future, okay? And that is what you all do in CASA, is you help families envision a hopeful future. Absolutely, I see that. And so that's so important. When you can't get to the front part of your brain to see that picture of a hopeful future, if you all help us get I'm gonna end now because it's been an hour. But I do want to let you know that this is just a little tiny smidgen of this 8-hour training that I do on trauma. And I would be so happy to come here and do it. Or once Lifespring gets, we're on kind of high COVID response because we do mental health, but we also do physical health at Lifespring. And so we're not having groups of people in the building yet. We were for a little while. It was so exciting, but now we're back. But once that gets started again, I would love if any of you all would love to come and join us and take the 8-hour training. Or I could come and talk some more about this. We could divide it up into shorter things. So I would be happy to do that. So I just wanted to offer that. So, any questions? I see.
I have a comment for you. Honestly, in as many years as I've been with CASA, I have been through this like countless times. Thank you so much for this in. You just sunk in.
Thank you.
I mean, you put it in understanding ways. That frontal cortex. or my thing just.
Yeah. Finally, your brain is ready, isn't it? Ready to
Okay, why did we tell us that?
Well, it's something I'm very passionate about because of my trauma history and the fact that it was just life-changing. The 8-hour training I do was from a guy from the Northwest Oregon who did all this research and all this stuff. And he came to Scottsburg, Indiana, and taught 25 of us how to teach that. And I mean, he started this, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is what I meant to spread the word of." I mean, this is so incredible. To me, trauma explains everything. I dare you to give me a social problem that I can't explain by.
What you gave to learn, I feel like I could go out here and use.
Good.
I mean, but I've seen all the stuff. It's like every time I think we're going to get a trauma training in terms of stuff about the brain, which I already knew the part footage because I've seen them 1,000 times. But now I know what these parts are doing.
It turns into a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
It does, and you humanized it here where I can use what you said.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very helpful. As I say, I believe in CASA so much. And when I retire, I intend very much to
Write it down.
Get our
application now.
But in the meantime, I am very happy to do any kind of training or a discussion group, or, oh my gosh, I have books that we could read parts of and talk about on this. And so anyway, okay.
Trauma book club.
I was just gonna say that if I wish that foster parents could have.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we need more
I'd be happy to do
trauma-informed
that.
foster
I think that
families.
is exactly, that would be happy to talk to foster parents.
And this would even be something good for parents with, because we are in a state of reunification is the number one goal. And a lot of our families don't understand the trauma that their children have been through while they were in the system. So it would be really beneficial. And there is, few and far between trauma-informed parenting classes.
Right.
Most of them are parenting skills classes and not necessarily what I did affected my child and this is how I can help my child get over it.
Or what my mom did affected me. And it
Which affected my child, yes. And we have a
That's-
lot of generational trauma
That's it.
in this area. So,
Yeah.
I did have a question as well, though. What is the ideal age for that prefrontal cortex to start developing or to really get a grasp on developing?
Okay, don't judge any children, but
No.
13, 14, 15.
Okay. Which makes sense.
Okay.
Like I'm thinking about a lot of the kids that we have, that we work with, and they are dealing with all of those things. They're regulating their emotions and things of that nature, and whether or not was impacted, it's obviously impacted by trauma, but how much it was impacted by the trauma.
I think it's safe to figure that every client in the CASA system has a number of ACE scores.
Yes.
And that's how we treat it. We call it universal trauma treatment. We just figure everyone that comes to Lifespring has had trauma. And we don't, if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. We're going to work on it through the back door.
Right.
Yeah, so. Any other questions or thoughts? I enjoyed it so much, so thank you.
I'm gonna stop this recording.